Most people believe they would never obey a tyrant. They imagine themselves as the hero in the movie, the rebel, the person who stands up while everyone else stays silent. But history tells a different story. Ordinary people have followed dictators, defended cruelty, exposed innocent neighbors, and participated in systems they secretly hated. And the terrifying part is this: many of them were not evil people. They were normal, just like you, just like your friends, just like your family. So the real question is not, why do tyrants exist? The real question is, why do people obey them? Why do millions stay silent while a few individuals gain absolute power? And what if the answer is hidden inside one of the most disturbing psychological experiments ever conducted? Because decades ago, a group of students walked into a fake prison. Within days, they transformed into monsters and victims. No weapons, no real crimes, no real prison, just roles, authority, fear, and the terrifying realization that human behavior can change faster than anyone wants to admit. The Stanford Prison Experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It collapsed in 6 days. But today, in the age of social media, surveillance, online mobs, and digital control, some experts believe humanity is running a new version of that experiment on a global scale. A Stanford Prison Experiment 2.0, and most people don't even realize they're inside it. The original experiment sounded simple. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo recruited ordinary college students for a study about prison life. Healthy young men, no criminal backgrounds, no history of violence. They were randomly assigned into 2 groups, prisoners and guards. That's it, random chance. One group received uniforms, sunglasses, and authority. The other group received prison numbers and humiliation. The basement of Stanford University became a fake prison. Cameras were installed, rules were established, and then something strange happened. The guards started changing almost immediately. They became aggressive, controlling, sadistic, not because someone ordered them to, not because they were born evil, but because the environment rewarded domination. The prisoners also changed. They became submissive, emotionally broken. Some experienced panic attacks. Others obeyed commands they knew were absurd. Within days, the line between acting and reality disappeared. People lost themselves inside the system. And maybe the most disturbing part of the experiment wasn't the guards. It was how quickly everyone accepted the situation as normal. Even Zimbardo himself became trapped inside the role of prison superintendent. The experiment stopped only because one outsider walked in and said the obvious. This is wrong. One voice broke the illusion. One person saw what everyone else had stopped noticing. Now think about modern society. Think carefully. How many systems today operate exactly like that experiment? Social media platforms reward outrage and conformity. Corporations monitor behavior through algorithms. Governments collect massive amounts of personal data. Online mobs destroy reputations overnight. People silence themselves because they fear social punishment. Employees obey absurd workplace rules because they need survival. Citizens repeat opinions they don't even believe because disagreement feels dangerous. Does this sound familiar? Because tyranny rarely begins with tanks in the streets. It begins with small compromises, tiny acts of obedience. One person stays silent, another follows orders, another rationalizes cruelty because it's just policy. And slowly a culture transforms. The frightening truth is that most tyrannies are not built by psychopaths alone. They are built by millions of ordinary people trying to avoid conflict. Humans crave belonging. We fear exclusion more than we fear injustice. That's why social pressure is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Entire societies can drift toward authoritarian behavior while believing they are still moral. That's how dangerous systems survive. They don't force everyone immediately. They normalize obedience step by step. Psychologists discovered something even darker. After the Stanford experiment, people obey authority even when authority clearly violates their conscience. Years before Zimbardo's study, another experiment shocked the world. Participants were instructed to deliver electric shocks to another person every time they answered a question incorrectly. The shocks appeared increasingly painful. The person screamed, begged, eventually stopped responding. Yet most participants continued because an authority figure calmly told them to proceed. Ordinary people inflicting what they believed was severe pain simply because someone in a lab coat said, "Continue." This wasn't ancient history. This was modern society. Educated citizens, neighbors, friends. Humans are deeply vulnerable to authority structures, and tyrants understand this better than anyone. They know people don't need to love the system, they only need to fear stepping outside it. Once fear becomes stronger than conscience, obedience spreads like a virus. And today, technology has amplified this process to terrifying levels. Modern control doesn't always require physical violence. Sometimes it only requires psychological pressure, public shaming, social isolation, career destruction, digital surveillance. The prison walls are no longer made of concrete. They exist inside people's minds. Here's where things become even more unsettling. Most people believe tyrants control society through fear alone, but that's incomplete. The smartest tyrants also provide comfort, entertainment, convenience, endless distraction. Think about it. Why revolt when you're constantly stimulated? Notifications, short videos, trends, arguments, shopping, dopamine loops. Modern systems don't just punish disobedience, they exhaust attention itself. People become too distracted to think deeply, too emotionally drained to resist, too divided to unite. And once citizens stop thinking critically, authority grows stronger automatically. This is why some historians argue that modern authoritarianism looks very different from the dictatorships of the past. In older systems, control was visible. Soldiers marched through streets, censorship was obvious. Today, control often feels invisible. People willingly hand over data, they monitor each other online, they attack dissenters voluntarily. The system doesn't always need force, because citizens enforce conformity themselves. Just like the guards in the Stanford Prison Experiment, nobody forced them to become cruel, they adapted because the environment rewarded it. And if you think this only happens in politics, think again. Tyrannical behavior appears everywhere humans organize into hierarchies. Schools, offices, relationships, friend groups, online communities. The moment a system rewards obedience and punishes independent thought, people begin changing psychologically. Some become submissive to survive. Others become authoritarian because power feels intoxicating. Have you ever noticed how certain people completely transform once they gain even a tiny amount of authority? A manager becomes arrogant. A moderator becomes obsessed with control. A teacher humiliates students publicly. A police officer abuses power. It happens constantly because power changes human behavior faster than most people realize. And the scary part is that almost everyone believes they are immune. Almost nobody says, "I could become the guard." But the Stanford experiment revealed a horrifying possibility. Under the right conditions, many people can. Tyranny is not created by monsters descending from the sky. It emerges from ordinary psychology interacting with systems of power. History proves this repeatedly. Some of the darkest chapters in human civilization were not carried out by cartoon villains. They were carried out by bureaucrats, workers, clerks, citizens following procedures, people convinced they were simply doing their jobs. And this creates an uncomfortable question nobody likes asking. If you lived inside one of those systems, would you resist, or would you adapt like most people do? Because resistance sounds heroic in theory. In reality, it often means losing status, friends, opportunities, safety, or even freedom. That's why conformity becomes so seductive. Humans evolved in tribes. Being excluded historically meant death. Our brains still carry that fear. Modern tyrants exploit it perfectly. They divide populations into groups. They reward loyalty publicly. They punish dissent visibly. And eventually people stop speaking honestly, even to themselves. This is how societies drift toward collective madness. Not overnight, gradually, quietly, through millions of tiny moments where individuals choose comfort over courage. But there's another side to this story. Because despite all the darkness revealed by these experiments, one detail matters more than anything else. The system collapsed when even a single person challenged it. One outsider questioned the prison. One voice interrupted the illusion. That's important because tyranny depends on psychological momentum. It survives when people believe resistance is impossible. The moment someone breaks the silence, others begin waking up too. History shows this again and again. Every oppressive system appears invincible until suddenly it doesn't. Because human beings are deeply influenced by social proof in both directions. Just as people conform to tyranny, they can also conform to courage. One act of resistance inspires another. One honest voice gives others permission to think critically again. This is why authoritarian systems fear independent thinkers so intensely. Not because one person alone can destroy the system, but because truth spreads unpredictably once fear begins cracking. Today we live in a world where manipulation operates at unbelievable speed. Algorithms learn emotional triggers better than most humans understand themselves. News cycles weaponize outrage. Political tribes demand loyalty. Influencers shape identity. Corporations engineer addiction. Artificial intelligence predicts behavior patterns. And every day people are nudged, pressured, categorized, and emotionally managed in ways previous generations could never imagine. The modern prison is psychological architecture. Invisible systems shaping attention, emotion, and perception. That's why the Stanford Prison Experiment feels more relevant now than ever before. It wasn't just about prisons. It was about environments controlling behavior. And modern digital environments are far more powerful than a basement prison in 1971. They reach billions of people simultaneously. They influence elections, relationships, beliefs, fears, and desires. The experiment never truly ended. So how do people avoid becoming obedient to tyrants? The answer is harder than most motivational speeches admit. It requires self-awareness, critical thinking, emotional discipline, the courage to tolerate social discomfort. Because resisting manipulation often feels lonely at first. You must learn to question authority without becoming paranoid. Question narratives without losing touch with reality. Recognize emotional conditioning while remaining compassionate. This balance is difficult. Most people swing toward blind obedience or chaotic cynicism. But genuine freedom exists somewhere in the middle. It begins when individuals stop outsourcing all thinking to systems, leaders, influencers, or crowds. Tyrants thrive when citizens become passive, when they stop examining information critically, when they prioritize comfort over truth. Freedom requires effort, mental effort, emotional effort, moral effort, and many people unconsciously avoid that burden because obedience feels easier. Many individuals would rather surrender some freedom than face existential ambiguity. Tyrants understand this ancient human weakness. They offer simple answers to complex problems. They promise enemies to hate and heroes to worship. They reduce chaos into emotionally satisfying narratives, and once people emotionally invest in those narratives, facts become almost irrelevant. That's why propaganda works. Not because humans are stupid, but because humans are emotional creatures searching for security, belonging, and meaning. The Stanford Prison Experiment exposed how fragile identity really is. Put people inside certain environments long enough, and they adapt, faster than expected. That realization terrifies psychologists because it suggests morality is less stable than we like believing. Most people imagine character is fixed, but situational pressure changes behavior dramatically. This doesn't mean humans are doomed. It means vigilance matters, systems matter, culture matters, incentives matter. The environment surrounding people shape their actions constantly. And in the digital age, humanity spends more time inside artificial environments than ever before. Social media feeds, recommendation algorithms, virtual communities, information bubbles. All of these systems influence behavior invisibly. They reward some actions and punish others. Over time, individuals adapt psychologically without realizing it. That's exactly what happened in the experiment. Participants slowly normalized the abnormal. Now imagine this happening globally. Imagine billions of people exposed daily to systems optimized for emotional manipulation, outrage, tribalism, and conformity. That's why some experts call modern society the Stanford Prison Experiment 2.0. The scale is unprecedented, and unlike the original experiment, most participants don't know they're participating. Every click trains algorithms. Every emotional reaction feeds systems designed to capture attention. Every public opinion becomes part of invisible social pressure networks. Humans are being conditioned continuously by digital environments. The terrifying part isn't that someone controls everything from a secret room. Reality is more complex. Systems evolve naturally around incentives. Companies chase profit, politicians chase power, platforms chase engagement, but the combined effect still shapes human psychology massively. And unless people become conscious of those forces, obedience becomes automatic. So ask yourself something uncomfortable. How many of your opinions are truly yours? How many behaviors are authentic choices? How much of your attention has been programmed by systems competing to influence you? Most people never stop to examine this. They move from trend to trend, outrage to outrage, fear to fear, without questioning who benefits from their emotional reactions. Tyranny in the modern world doesn't always require chains. Sometimes it only requires constant distraction, constant emotional stimulation, constant division. Because distracted people rarely resist effectively, emotionally exhausted people rarely think critically, divided populations rarely unite against systems exploiting them. And that's why awareness matters so much, not fear, awareness. The goal is not paranoia, the goal is consciousness, the ability to pause and ask, why am I reacting this way? Who benefits from this fear? What systems are shaping my perception right now? The most dangerous tyrants are often the ones people never recognize as tyrants until it's too late. They don't arrive announcing evil intentions. They present themselves as protectors, saviors, voices of reason, champions of security, morality, or progress, and many genuinely believe they are doing good. That's another uncomfortable truth. Human beings are remarkably skilled at justifying harmful behavior when they believe the cause is righteous. The guards in Stanford didn't wake up planning cruelty. Step by step, they normalized it. History repeats this pattern constantly. Oppression grows gradually. Language shifts first, then norms, then behaviors, then suddenly society reaches a point where people look back and wonder, how did we get here? The answer is always the same: small compromises accumulated over time. But there is hope inside all of this. Human psychology also contains the capacity for resistance, courage, empathy, and moral clarity. Just as environments can corrupt behavior, they can also inspire extraordinary integrity. History remembers individuals who refused obedience when everyone else surrendered. Whistleblowers, dissidents, journalists, activists, ordinary citizens who protected strangers despite enormous pressure. These people matter because they remind society that conformity is not inevitable. Human beings always retain the ability to choose differently. The challenge is recognizing manipulation before it becomes normalized. That requires awareness most people never develop, because modern life moves too fast. Reflection becomes rare, and without reflection, humans become highly programmable. So maybe the real lesson of the Stanford Prison Experiment isn't simply that people obey tyrants. Maybe the deeper lesson is that human beings are dangerously adaptable. We become shaped by whatever systems surround us most consistently. Fear shapes us, incentives shape us, social pressure shapes us, digital environments shape us. And unless we consciously protect independent thought, we slowly drift toward obedience without even noticing. Tyranny does not begin when chains appear. It begins when people stop questioning, when silence becomes safer than honesty, when comfort becomes more important than conscience. The experiment exposed a terrifying truth about humanity, but it also revealed something powerful. Systems are not permanent. Illusions can break. And all it takes to begin that process is one person willing to see clearly while everyone else looks away. The next time you watch people blindly follow trends, defend abusive systems, attack dissenters, or surrender freedom for comfort, remember this: the Stanford Prison Experiment never truly ended. It evolved into modern society. The uniforms changed. The prison walls became invisible. The guards became algorithms, institutions, ideologies, influencers, and social pressure itself. But the psychological mechanisms remain the same: obedience, fear, conformity, silence. The question is no longer whether tyrants exist. They always will. The real question is whether ordinary people can recognize manipulation before they become part of it.